Thank you for your patience. This is really a very, very important program for the Citizens Club of Springfield. And as we get started, it's my pleasure to thank our sponsors tonight, and those include WMAY Radio, NPR Radio, the City of Springfield's Audio-Visual Department of the Mayor's Office. And then I also want to thank those elected officials who are here with us this evening. Please stand and be recognized. The Citizens Club's mission is to advance the public's understanding of topics that concern the Springfield community. We are a nonpartisan organization supported by annual dues. Remarks and opinions and anything shared by our presenters are their own. The Citizens Club is not responsible for these comments, and anything shared by our presenters is not an official club position. Our next Friday morning program is May 24th at 8 a.m. right here in the Hoagland on the 3rd floor. Joining us will be Scott Dahl, who I think I saw here tonight, Director of Springfield Convention and Visitors Bureau. Scott will moderate a program called Talking Tourism with his leadership team at Visit Springfield, so we welcome all of you to join us then. Tonight, I'm going to introduce our moderator, Bernie Schoenberg, who is going to introduce the governor. So thanks again for being here, and thanks for your patience.
It's fun being short. Okay. Good evening. Governor J.B. Pritzker, the 43rd governor of the state, has been in office a little more than 5 years, and a lot has happened. He has had to deal with issues big and small, and we are gratified that he is here tonight to have a discussion about Springfield, where, if you didn't notice, a lot of state work is going on at the Capitol complex and elsewhere. The governor was born in California, but has long called Illinois home. He got a law degree from Northwestern and has been a business person and investor, and founded the nonprofit business incubator 1871, named for the innovation and development that came after the Great Chicago Fire of that year. He kept us informed of state health efforts daily for months when COVID hit, and while of course there can be differences of opinion on policy direction, he has been a strong advocate and worked with the General Assembly to advance infrastructure spending, seek business development, up the minimum wage, and promote LGBTQ rights, reproductive rights, and public safety. Earlier today, he was normal to announce state incentives for the $1.5 billion investment that electric automaker Rivian is making to bring production of its new R2 midsize SUV to that location. It is anticipated that will add another 550 jobs over 5 years to more than 8,000 already there. The governor... The governor and his wife, MK, have a daughter, Teddy, and a son, Don. They're both in college. Tonight, Governor Pritzker will give a short presentation concerning fiscal health and economic policy, and I will then join him on stage for some Q&A. Again, hello to all my friends and public officials that used to be in a column that used to exist. And ladies and gentlemen, Governor Pritzker.
Well, it is really great to be here this evening. Is this like, can you hear me if I'm good? It is great to be here this evening, and thank you very much, Bernie, for the kind introduction. And I guess in just a few minutes I'll get grilled by Bernie, but I wanted to take the opportunity to talk to you first and just say how honored I am to be here with the Citizens Club of Springfield. It's your mission that's so important to create a conversation surrounding policy and issues affecting the community, and it's really imperative, especially in this polarized world that we live in, that we have calm, respectful dialogue. It's much needed in our society, and that we can agree or disagree, but walk away and shake hands and know that we can debate another day and move policy forward in one fashion or another. The First Lady and I love Springfield, we really do, and I think for any of you who have heard or know my wife, she has taken it as a mission of hers to leave a mark in a positive way on the city, starting with the upgrade and decorating of the governor's mansion. She wrote a book with, actually, he was the decorator of the Obama White House, and also is a famed decorator, has a number of books out, but he helped her write the book, but she really led it, and to be clear, it has some tremendous history that many people just haven't heard about Springfield, and now will. In fact, it's on its second printing, which is kind of an impressive thing when you think that, we're talking about a governor's mansion in Springfield, Illinois, and there are a whole lot of other governor's mansions out there in books, frankly. So I'm very proud of the work that she's done, and she also has worked with the mayor here on, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about this, Bernie, on the Y block, as people often refer to it, but the North Mansion block, and big plans and opportunities there that I'd love to get into. I want to just express a special thank you first to all the people of Springfield, because people have been genuinely welcoming and kind to us, and we really love spending time here. I want to express a special thank you to Senator Doris Turner, who I knew before she became a state senator. Many of you knew her long before that, but she's been especially genuine and kind to me, and I get to work with her now in the General Assembly, and she does really just tremendous work on your behalf, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. She's working for you. Yeah. I also want to thank Joyce Narduli, and thank you very much to the board of directors here at the club for your efforts to continue these important conversations. I also want to just take a moment to recognize the passing of, I think, a friend of all of us, and that's Lee Milner. Lee, it's when you show up as governor anyway, and many of you have known him for a whole heck of a long time, but when you show up as governor and there's somebody really kind among the press corps, who's just there. Yeah, that's unusual. Really just, and somewhat quiet, kind, and occasionally, give you a smile and a wink maybe, or just he'll be there at the very end. And that's how I got to know him, was that, he would hang out a little bit at the end, and I got to talk to him and learn about him, and got to see him all the time. I mean, he showed up at everything. And that's unusual too, because it seems like the press corps changes, from one day to the next, but Lee was always there, and I just wanted to say, how special he was, and especially to say to all of you who he was a friend of, may his memory be a blessing to all of us. So later on, we're going to sit down and talk about everything, or whatever Bernie would like to talk about, and whatever you would like to talk about. But I wanted to just take a few minutes. You see this, and I'm sorry that there was apparently some technical difficulties, but as you can see from what's on the screen, I wanted to just talk for a few minutes about what's happened to state finances, because, when I was running for governor in 2017, I remember we did our first poll, as you will, in a campaign, and my pollster came back and said, the most unusual thing came out of this poll. What? I've never seen a poll before where people just volunteered that the most important issue to them was the state budget. It's not something that happens, he said to me, in any other state. Nobody cares about the state budget. They care about the issues and the things that budgets fund, but nobody talks about the budget. And of course, that was the talk of everything, I think, in 2017, certainly, and for many years before that, and of course, the years after. And so I thought I'd just I think there are 7 slides here, so we can go through them relatively quickly so you can see what's happened. Good, this is working. So as you can see, I summarized on the left in the blue box what's really happened. We've gone from having bill backlog. Some of you remember when it was $17 billion, and that was in 2017. But by the time I came into office, some of it had been paid down, but $6 billion, $7 billion of it had been refinanced. We're actually still paying for that, the refinancing. But it was an important thing to do because we were paying 12% on overdue bills in the state of Illinois. We had $17 billion of it. 12% is a lot. And so the refinancing of at least $7 or $8 billion of it went down, brought the financing interest rate down to 4 or 5%. So that saved a lot of money, but it's still debt that has to be paid, and we are paying that down. In fact, we have entirely paid that down now. We have that $8 billion went to zero. So every state has a rainy day fund except Illinois. That Comptroller Dan Hines created the rainy day fund back in 2001 or 2, and it had, for most of the time, it had $60,000 in it. Just so you know, state government runs for about 12 seconds on $60,000. So that's not much of a rainy day fund. But we have built that fund up to $2.3 billion. We received 8 credit downgrades just in the 4 years prior to my taking office. It actually, I just read a history of it, we actually had something like 21 credit downgrades starting in 2010, and so it was just 8 of them were in the 4 years before I took office. We've now received 9 credit upgrades, and it's in part because of the 2 things above it that we've eliminated the bill backlog, because we've put money into our rainy day fund. But those 9 credit upgrades, it should be a real badge of honor for everybody in the General Assembly, everybody sitting in this audience, everything about the state of Illinois. Those are independent rating upgrades. It's not like we made this up, it's a political thing. No. I went to New York City in my first couple of weeks in office to meet with the bond investors for the state of Illinois and meet with the credit rating agencies to say, folks, we're not as bad as you think. I mean, we're going to be better now. And I have a plan, and here are the things that I think we can do to improve the finances of the state, and kind of, give us a minute here, because we were on the verge of junk status in the state of Illinois, the worst credit rating in the entire country. And I wanted them to understand that we're going to be responsible about this. And I think making that promise and delivering on that promise for the rating agencies has meant a lot to them in terms of the way they look at Illinois. But the one thing they said to me back in 2019 early was, we don't think Illinois knows how to govern itself. I mean, that was like, those were words that they used to describe the state of Illinois, and why, one of the reasons they weren't giving us credit upgrades in any fashion. We had, frankly, a dismal history, and so I think we've proved to them that we can govern properly, and so that is why not only do we have 9 credit upgrades, but we recently, Moody's gave us a positive outlook, which is kind of halfway to getting another credit upgrade. They kind of tell you positive outlook, and then they hold you to account to make sure you keep doing the right thing. So proud of that. Just quickly, our economy is growing, and importantly, our pension fund is better funded today than it was when I took office. And we are continuing on that path. In fact, I have made pension reforms along the way. They aren't those big, flashy things that people were talking about in the mid-2010s, rather, but they are steadily giving us a better situation in our pensions, and again, leading to better credit. But that trajectory, you'll see in a minute, is going to continue. This is our budgetary balance. So I think when I came into office, every year we do a 5-year projection of our state finances and our deficits. I did a report when I first came into office showing that we had about a $3.2 billion structural deficit. So that means, either you've got to make some pretty big cuts, or you've got to find revenue, or you got to do both. And I mean, $3.2 billion is a big number considering our budget was about $40 billion at the time. So the projection was these blue bars, or whatever they are, aqua bars, sorry, down below, that we were frankly going to continue to have deficits ad infinitum. And instead, over the course of the last 4 years, we've put ourselves into positive territory. If you're have some consternation about the idea that the last bar seems small, I think all I can tell you is I said when I gave my State of the State speech, a budget speech, that it would be a tight year. It is a tight year. And part of that is because we're not growing as fast this year, talking about the broader U.S. economy, and Illinois, is not growing quite as fast this year as it was in prior years. And so that affects our budget, but we are balancing the budget. We will not finish this this month without having a balanced budget for the state of Illinois. And really I credit the members of the General Assembly who kind of came to the table and understood that this is the important, best thing we can do for our future. I'll quickly, this is just a demonstration of what happened to our bill backlog and our short-term debt. We virtually eliminated all short-term debt in the state, and it's not just the bill backlog, it's all the other bills. We had group health insurance bills and lots of other things that were kind of, sitting in people's drawers, and I mean, I say that jokingly, but we had really billions and billions of dollars of debt beyond just the bill backlog. We're now, to give you an idea, for those of you in business, you talk about days payable, how many days till you are paying your bills on average, and usually in business, 30, 60, 90 days, something in that range is reasonable. State government, when I came in office or just before, was paying bills on average in 250 days. So think about doing business with anybody that says we'll pay you 9 months later. Nobody wants to do business with you. Today we're paying bills literally in 14 days. I would argue, and I've told this to the comptroller, maybe we could make that 30 days and earn interest on our money, but 14 days is pretty darn good, and we're in good shape in terms of our creditors and the way they view us as a result. This is kind of just, again, a visualization of what happened in our rainy day fund. You can see what's happened over the last 3 years. And by the way, we've made some automated payments now into the rainy day fund, so that number is going to continue to go up. So some of the cannabis money is going to go into this. When we paid off the unemployment insurance trust fund, we made a loan to the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund because it will replenish itself on its own, but we needed to put money in there for the time being. And so as that gets paid back, it's a $450 million loan. $45 million per year is getting paid back into the rainy day fund. So once again, this number will continue to go up even if we don't do anything deliberate, which I would like to do. We really should be taking this number from about $2.2 billion to, in my view, it should be approximately $8 billion. So did I say that right? 2.2? Sorry, we should get to about almost $5 billion. So the pension obligations for us now, I don't know, can you all see that line that's on? Okay, I can't see it very well from here, but I wanted to show you, you can see the mountain that we were climbing in the mid-2010s, and frankly, the panic that ensued for people like me and everybody else who was looking at, what was going to happen to our pension system. There are a variety of things that have occurred, one of which is to credit the General Assembly and the governor back in 2012, 2011, there's a tier 2 system. Some of you may be in that tier 2 system. It's a less expensive retirement system for the state, but just to be clear, that is one reason why this has flattened out. A second very important reason is it was a Republican idea from a former state representative called Mark Batnick. That was to offer to people who are retiring a pension buyout at a discount, but you can get all your money at once rather than waiting to get it ratably over a long period of time. And the result of that also has flattened this out. But I think it's important just to notice that this is a graph of what percent of our budget are we going to be spending on pensions. And that percent, as you can see, if we do nothing new, that percent is going to remain at about 20% for, till about 2038. What I want to do, and I've proposed it this year, major pension reform, is to take some of the, we have a leftover problem from Rod Blagojevich, lots of problems probably, but one of them in the pension system was he borrowed in a pension obligation bond $10 billion, but only put $7.5 billion into the system and spent the other $2.5 billion. So that is debt that we've been paying off and paying interest on basically for this entire time. That goes till the early 2030s. The other is that we have leftover payments to pay off that borrowing that we did to pay down the bill backlog, and that also ends in the early 2030s. So if you combine those two things, and instead of just letting those drop off, we continue to pay them as if those bonds continued to need to be paid, and we paid those into the pension system instead, it will bend this curve down in a very significant way starting in about 2033 and take us to a better place. Last thing is that, and we'll get a credit upgrade for this, I'm sure, and that is that the Edgar ramp, which is aiming at funding the system at 90%. No other state aims at 90%. Every other state aims at funding their pension system at 100%. So we get an immediate credit, hit just for the fact that we don't even aim at 100%. So what I did was propose that with that change, we would also change the date at which we will have reached our goal to 2048, and it will be 100%. So we will have a fully funded pension system by 2048. I know that seems like an awfully long way. Everybody's going to get paid their pension between now and then. It's just a question of whether we're really doing a good job of paying our long-term debts here. And that is the right thing to do. It is something that would be good for our credit rating and good for the future of our pension system. So quickly, we've had great economic results in the state of Illinois, and part of it is we've reorganized the way we do things. I'll start with just kind of debunking a myth that's out there. I'm sure there are people who will debate me on this, but when when I was running for office in 2017, all the talk was about the Illinois exodus and who's leaving the state, and if you looked at it, the plurality of people leaving the state were basically 18-year-olds who were choosing not to go to school in the state of Illinois because they couldn't afford the tuition, and that's a huge number of people, and that's something that, like, from my perspective, easily part of my agenda, which is keep our smartest kids in the state of Illinois, make sure we're funding our education system properly. So to address the Illinois exodus, if for no other reason, right, but lots of other good reasons to do it, but everybody's reporting that we're losing 100,000 people a year, and it's just a terrible downdraft. Then we did the census in 2020. But by the way, why do they think we were losing 100,000? Because they do a survey, and not a census, but every year they do a survey called the American Community Survey. It's a poll. I mean, it's a more sophisticated thing than just a regular poll, but it's a poll. And they guesstimate what your population is, growth or decline. And they guesstimated that our decline was 50, 100,000 people a year. Turns out when we actually did a census count, our population hadn't changed for 2010 to 2020. It changed by 15,000 people, almost none. But I mean, basically we were flat, not going downward. So that was in 2020, that's what got reported. Then shortly after that, they do something called a post-enumeration survey, which is where they kind of check their work at the Census Bureau. And they came back and said, oh, there are a bunch of states that we got wrong, and Illinois is one of them. Illinois' population is actually about almost 2% higher than we estimated, so Illinois' population is 13,062,000, which is not 12,000,419, or, you know, and so, you know, this idea that we're losing population, we can all have a debate, is that enough growth, or, you know, but we're not losing population in the state of Illinois. Oh, what's happened in 2021, 2022, 2023? The American Community Survey says we're losing population again. I don't know what to say, except I have had so many conversations with the Census Bureau and the Department of Commerce about something's wrong with the survey, because it's just not factual. And I have lots of other data to back up the idea. Look at all the people that are working. We have more people working in the state of Illinois in 2024, many more people working in 2024 than we had in 2020, for example, or 2019. And so, you know, this idea that we're losing population, I don't know, you know, who we're losing. So it's a debate, you know, we'll continue to have, but the data that comes out of the Census Bureau that came from our census shows that we are not losing population. Okay, I know we need to get to our discussion on the stage, but last thing is just, I wanted to show you some of the economic foundation of the state of Illinois. The whole point of this, and you can read what's on the left side of this, I think the most important thing is, this is a great state. I mean, this is, our state is, we have a strong economic foundation. We're the 5th largest economy among the 50 states. It's where we've been for a very long time, the 5th largest, but we are the 5th largest. If we were an independent country, we'd be the 18th biggest economy in the entire world. We'd be a member of the G20, Illinois. And that's a lot to sell. The fact that we have such a great workforce, an educated workforce, some of the greatest universities. I could go down all of the wonderful examples. I keep something called the superlatives list, which is, you know, where Illinois is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in various categories. You know, we're number 2 in education, the U.S. News and World Report reports about our education system. Do you ever hear that? We're number 2 in infrastructure, both by CNBC and by U.S. News and World Report. We moved from 30th, according to CNBC, in terms of states, best states to do business in, from 30th to 17th. Would I like to be number 1? Yes, I'm striving to get there, but moving up 13 places in the last 5 years is pretty good. And you can see we have all these great companies here, and yes, do we lose companies? Of course we do. Do we gain companies? Yeah, but you don't hear about that, right? The fact that Kellogg's moved their snack business to Chicago never gets reported, but when we lost, you know, a hedge fund, that got big news. You know, from my perspective, you know, just so you know, in 2023, we had more than one business per day move to the state of Illinois. So more than 500 companies moved to the state of Illinois in 2023. You don't hear much about that either. So yes, I'm a promoter of the state. I think that's what the governor is supposed to do. I'm the best chief marketing officer for the state, or I'm trying to be. And it's not just promoting, you know, I realize we have challenges. I'm not overlooking those, and we're addressing them as I showed you in the prior slides. But I also want you to know that the greatness of Illinois shines through, and that we all need to kind of recognize that what's really good that's happening in our state and what we need to build on. So with that, I'd like to invite Bernie up.
Welcome again.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me take
Sounds like the mics are working.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Governor, for being here. And as you know, well, it's your new hometown now, in addition to that Chicago place. So we're going to ask a lot of local questions and maybe a little beyond, so thanks. About that Rivian announcement today, I don't know how far and wide those 8,000 people that work there now live, but do you think that has effect on Springfield? And whatever the state incentives are, and I know it involves like a $75 million infusion of cash and certainly infrastructure, or I think you're building a couple new another training facility up there. Is it worth it? It's always been a question. When Mitsubishi built there, people asked Governor Thompson, was it worth it building, $70 or $80 million in highways to get to the plant? Is it worth it?
So whenever we provide any incentives, and I guess I want to back up and just remind all of you, we did not have an economic development corporation. We still don't in the state of Illinois. In fact, when I came into office, I was shocked. I came out of business. I thought, my God, of course, every state's got an economic development arm. We didn't. We have Department of Commerce, but that is not an economic development arm. If you go to Michigan, if you go to Tennessee and Texas, and I can name a whole bunch of states, South Carolina, they all have a specific, it's not a department, it's an independent entity whose job it is to attract businesses to their states, to help. When a company says, I might want to move to your state, they jump on it and they tell you, okay, here's where we're going to get your workforce from, and here's how we're going to help you get property tax abatement from local schools because it's beneficial to the local community to have you move there. Here are all the permits that you need, and we'll try to help you through that process and so on. We never had that in Illinois. So it was really shocking to me. So we've now built that, but not by going into statute and creating an economic development corporation, which is something I think we should consider. But instead, because I was in business and I felt like I need to be on top of this thing, we built it with Department of Commerce, but really run out of the governor's office directly. So I'm on the phone with companies all the time, from all sizes, from Rivian, which is investing $1.5 billion just in this expansion and bringing 550 jobs minimum, to companies that want to bring, all the way down to companies that want to bring 100 jobs. We just, brought Manor Polymers to Mount Vernon, and that very important for Mount Vernon. It was I think they start out with 60 jobs, and they're going to go to 100 jobs. I mean, frankly, for Mount Vernon, that's a big deal, and the state ought to be helping, and so that's what we're doing. So, to the point, every deal, and I call them deals, but every opportunity, every business, we look at the incentives that we're putting forward, and we've changed the way that we do incentives in the state to make them actually pay off for the taxpayers, because in the end, that's the deal that that I think people expect us to make. We look at how many years does it take to pay us back, right? So each of it has to be less than 5, typically. And we look at what the effect is over 30 years of having a business move to Illinois, plant that kind of capital in the ground, and hire people. So the payback on Rivian is less than 5 years. And I can't remember the exact number now. It might be 3.5 or 4 years. But that's actually a pretty good deal when you consider what they're doing in terms of building their business in there. And remember, we're beating out, I guess I'm a competitive sort. We're always competing against other states, as you can imagine, and it's unfortunate. It shouldn't be that way, but that is how it works. And sometimes it's with capital, by the way, and sometimes it's like we have a better workforce, and Mississippi is not a competitor of ours, to be clear, right? But we are competing with Michigan and Tennessee. I mentioned some of them. So in this case, we're competing with Georgia, which they had already announced they're going to build a new factory in Georgia to build their new vehicle. So we're competing with that. And it's always easier to invest in a company that's here in the state to get them to stay than it is to try to get a new company to come. And so we should be helping the companies that are in the state to grow, and also working on outside companies to get them to move here. So it's a good deal for the taxpayers. The payback is within a reasonable amount of time, and we will ultimately, job creation, forget the payback for the state, although that's hugely important. It's also like how many people are getting jobs and what kind of jobs are they? And these are good paying jobs. And if you've not been to the Rivian plant, manufacturing has changed, as you know, over lots of years. It's no longer this kind of, mostly not this kind of dirty shop floor where, you go home with, dirt all over you. And so, these are run by computers, they're robots, involved, but there are a whole lot of jobs. I mean, there are now going to be almost 9,000 jobs at Rivian.
Very good. And they have very cool headlights.
They do.
All right. Next subject, you teased this in your little talk over here, but and congratulations on the upgrades that you and First Lady MK, as well as Governor Bruce and First Lady Diana Rauner have made to the Executive Mansion. About that Y block, the North Mansion block, you said there are plans. Fill us in.
Well, okay. We're still working all that out, but I know the mayor is here, so we could negotiate right now. No, there's really not a negotiation. I mean, it really is a collaborative endeavor to figure out how do we make this most useful for Springfield? Because this is not a business deal. This is really about upgrading life for people in Springfield, making sure that we're making the most out of that block. The minute we got to the governor's mansion, my wife was like, what are we going to do here? What is going to happen on this block? And she's been focused on it really for all this time. And you might say, well, gosh, it's been so long. Why hasn't it happened? Variety of reasons, but suffice to say, we have left it to the city to tell us, what do you want? What do you want? And then how can we help as a state? And I want to credit former Senator, now Deputy Governor Andy Manar, because he's really been on top of this. I mean, he represented the area. He understands this as well as anybody, and he's just as anxious as my wife is and me to make sure that this happens. So what is going to happen? I guess what I'll tease is that we believe it should be something open to the public, completely open to the public, and something that, that isn't impeded by buildings, that we're not putting, part of it into making a school. There was some discussion about putting a university building there or something. But that it should be something, when you think about a beautiful park, a beautiful use, also music. We've had that there for some time now. That's what this should be all year long. There should be use of this park all year, even when it's cold. And so that's what we're working on. I don't want to, give you some conclusion, because I would say it's not concluded yet. But what's on the table now is much further along than it ever has been, and it's been, over the last year since your new mayor took office, that we've had, lots and lots of interaction, and the state has taken action to make sure that this thing will move forward. So I want to promise all of you that, at a minimum, I am in office for about 2.5 more years, and that this discussion plan and at least the start of, if not the conclusion of, what will be on that block will have been done by the time I'm finished with my second term.
And is there a lot of state funding involved? Any state funding involved?
Bernie, you're not a reporter anymore. Suffice to say, we all have the same interests here, and there is an interest by the state, as there is by the city and the county, to make sure that this is a beautiful place for people to visit.
Okay, thank you. That was more than I thought we were going to get on that.
Okay, there you go. We can invite the mayor up, and she can give you a rendition of this.
Love you, Mayor. Speaking of city money, our city government and others have lamented, as you know, the loss of funds if your proposed elimination of the 1% grocery sales tax goes through. I know it means more than $3 and I think close to $4 million to the city of Springfield. Will the legislature pass your proposal? It looks like it will. And should the state do anything to ease the loss to municipalities?
Let me begin by saying I do not think people should pay taxes on groceries. I believe that. I do understand that anytime you talk about reducing a tax, right, that has an effect on government in general. I would also say that for years and years and years, what's happened is that legislators have said that the state should eliminate the grocery tax. I think it's the right thing to do. Just to kind of level set us all, there are 50 states. All of them but 13 have eliminated the grocery tax in their states. And so the question we have to answer for people is, how do we do it in a way that that recognizes the importance of revenue for local government? I want to remind all of you that since I took office, we've nearly doubled the amount of LGDF money. That's money the state sends to local government. I mean, that's $1 billion right there. In fact, in total, I think we've increased funding by $2 billion under my leadership and $3 billion since 2010 for local governments. And the cost, roughly speaking, for local governments across the board of eliminating the grocery tax is approximately $300 million, so out of $3 billion that the state has provided. And so, how do we make it easier? There are lots of proposals to do that. We're working on that this month. I don't know what the conclusion will be, but again, we should not have a grocery tax in the state, and it is a truly regressive tax. I know some of you will say, well, gosh, 1 penny on $1 doesn't seem like a lot, but then again, people come and say, well, every tax is burdensome, and so I'm not sure how to read when people say these things to me and they're contradictory, but I can tell you that this is one tax, and I really believe in having a less regressive tax system. This is one tax I think we can eliminate, and once again, I'm talking to lots of mayors and listening to local governments about how best to do it, but we can afford to do it.
Okay. On to the next subject. What improvements are needed or are already underway to improve the state fairgrounds? What is your vision for that? I know there's a study being done also by the Community Foundation here. I know a lot of things have been fixed and there's some work going on, but tell us where that's at and where it should be.
So I love the state fair. I just want you to know, I did not grow up with going to a state fair. There wasn't one available, or nobody ever told me about it. And nobody ever took me to one. And so I have to say, we have 2 great state fairs, but the big one, of course, is here in Springfield, and that fairgrounds is a phenomenal piece of property, but it's been neglected like so many other things in state government, right? And so when we passed, I say in state government, not putting aside all the departments and all the people and things that we need to make sure that we're providing for people across the state, the physical infrastructure of the state really had been run down. And so in 2019, when I came into office, and I promised I would do this, we got a big package passed, an infrastructure bill called Rebuild Illinois, and and I joke that, but I'm not joking, when you're driving on the highways, I'm sure people are cursing me when they see the orange cones and you're slowed down, but I kind of want to say sorry, not sorry, because for the next 30 years, we're going to have the best infrastructure in the country. We already have ranked the second best infrastructure in the country, and we're making real investments that matter. This is an investment in the fairgrounds here in Springfield. It's an investment for a lifetime, and we want to be able to show off what Springfield is. We also want to have, the best fairgrounds around. We can build this up. I said my first year in office to my staff, I want our fair to be, first of all, I want it to be profitable for the state, because it should be, and I want it to be something that people love going to, and that we build up and become, it becomes the highest attended fair that we've ever had, and it is now, and that we've got the best entertainment, and we've got the best facilities. And so we're doing that. I mean, radically, without going through building by building, but some of you, any of you, all of you who've been to the fair, I think you've seen, we're making real progress. It's exciting. I was actually there with the mayor. We're looking at some of the other new things that have gone in just this year, but every year there's been some upgrade that's going on, and it's because, everybody loves the fair. Everybody loves the fairgrounds. It's not just a one-time event, right? The fairgrounds are there for people to use all year round, and we want it to be, once again, beautiful and representative of Illinois' greatness.
Okay. You mentioned in your opening statement or discussion state pensions.
Yes.
And I know you also recently said, I read an article or two, that something needs to be done with Tier 2. I know for some people, they're working side by side with people with a much bigger pension, and sometimes they may get to a point where they're not making as much as Social Security would have paid. Do you have anything you can say to an interested Springfield crowd in state pensions, what Tier 2 changes might be coming?
I'm trying to set, first of all, set kind of a minimum here to make sure everybody understands, and some parameters for the discussion about it. One is that Tier 2 has to meet what's referred to as the Social Security safe harbor. And so at a minimum, we're talking about a few $billion. Nobody knows exactly what the number is because there's been one study done, but honestly, we need to do a lot more work on it. But suffice to say, it's some number that's around $3, $4, $5, $6 billion, I don't know, over the next, you saw that long line to 2048, but it's basically over the next 24 years. And the earlier we do it, just like when you hear about Social Security fixes in Washington, the earlier you do it, the better, right? So we need to get at this. So that's the minimum. I think, another point I'd make about the Tier 2 system, there are lots of things about the Tier 2 system that are being discussed, enhancements, benefits that people would like, a desire to lower the age of retirement and so on in the Tier 2 system. I think those things are all worthy of having conversations about. I just don't think we should pretend that what happened in the 90s and before is acceptable. That is to say that, it doesn't really affect us now, so let's just put a bunch of benefits in place and someone in the future will take care of it, right? Because we're living with the consequences of that. And we've gotten so many credit upgrades that, believe me, if we are not responsible about the way we handle our Tier 2 system, we're going to head right back down. Why do credit upgrades matter? Just to remind you, we are paying less for our debt in the state, and that is, we are saving hundreds of millions of dollars as a result of raising our credit rating and therefore lowering the percentage interest that we pay for when we sell our bonds. So I wanted to lay that out. The General Assembly is having hearings to determine what pieces of benefits make sense and what don't, but I have just generally said there's some parameters we all ought to work with and not be irresponsible.
Okay. We'll see where it goes. I know on the issue...
But I want to say one other thing, because I've said this all along, and I absolutely believe it. Everybody's going to get paid their pensions. I mean, this state is not going to default on its pensions. It never will. People were made a promise, whether it's a Tier 1 or Tier 2 pension. You got made a promise when you took a job with the state, you are going to get paid. I am never going to suggest that we cut pensions in the state of Illinois, and anybody that suggests that is just, out of their minds, frankly.
Okay. One of your big pushes this session, the House, and I know the House has passed, and I believe the Senate is still considering, it's where it's at, House Bill 5395, the Health Care Protection Act. It seems to limit so-called utilization management practices that insurance companies use to hold down costs, they say. You say your plan will save lives and lower costs for millions.
Yes. How would that work?
How would that work? Briefly.
Sure. Let's see. Briefly. It's a very complex bill. Yes, briefly. Let's start with this. Insurance companies have the right to raise your health insurance premiums to whatever number they want right now in Illinois. In most states, there's at least a regulatory body that can say, that's gouging. We don't have that capability in the state. I want to give us the capability of saying that's gouging. Not stop insurance companies from making money. We need insurance companies. They like to take advantage of their insureds, but we need insurance companies, and they're going to be profitable. But they don't need to be quite as profitable and they don't need to be able to gouge us and you. That's one big thing that's going to save people money, right? A second thing is I guess it's less about saving money as it is about saving lives. There's something, so if you know about utilization management or you don't, basically everybody here, I guarantee everybody in this room knows somebody who has had to get a prior authorization for something from their insurance company, right? Including my wife, and she had literally a piece of bone that had broken off of her neck and it was floating against a nerve, okay? And so there's only one way to deal with that, it's surgery. So her doctor scheduled surgery, and then the state insurance company, because we're covered by state insurance, the state insurance company said, no, you can't get authorized for that because you haven't done enough physical therapy. There's no physical therapy to get rid of a piece of bone that's floating around out there. There just isn't. And so for weeks and weeks and weeks, I'm just giving you our personal example, and we could have afforded to avoid the insurance and just do it, but I'm just giving you the example that we have personally. Everybody here has either had that problem or knows somebody. So that's a change that we're going to make. That is that prior authorization needs to meet the standard that a doctor uses. If your doctor says this is necessary, the insurance company cannot countermand that. They have to use the same medical standard that the doctor is using. It's just fair, rather than having a bureaucrat make a decision for you. So that's the second thing. I won't go through all the pieces of it, but I do want to point out that the last thing I want to tell you is there are these things called junk insurance policies, and these are sold to people who are like, you're between jobs, or you're just starting up a business and you don't have enough lives in your, in your group, and so, you want to get covered, and there are these kind of low-cost plans that exist out there. They sell it to you under a certain kind of marketing guise as something that, well, you can get covered for short term for not too much money. And then it turns out, and we have many, many examples, that you get sick, and guess what? The insurance company's like, oh, we don't cover that. Everything about you is something that was a pre-existing condition, according to them, and so they're not going to cover you. So we want to, like almost every other, 33 other states, we want to ban these junk insurance plans from the state of Illinois. Lots of other pieces of this bill. Sorry, we don't have time to do it, but suffice to say, this really is about protecting consumers from bad insurance carriers and making sure that we're saving people money with their premiums so they can't be gouged.
And I'd like to thank you for being brief. You have a state plan to combat homelessness called Home Illinois. Springfield, of course, has been, like many other communities, sought solutions for years to get people housed. Please tell us what is being done and how Springfield will benefit from this.
Again, this is a longer conversation, but Home Illinois is really designed to take a plan that we know works because it's worked in other places. In fact, I want you all to pay attention to the fact that one of the prime examples of success in dealing with homelessness, I'm talking about the national advocates will tell you this, exists in Rockford, Illinois. And basically without going through the whole plan, I'll just say they've managed to work out, this is about, every person needs to be housed. But everybody is at a different level of housing at any given moment. And so you've got to have different kinds of housing. It's not just let's build a bunch of apartment buildings and throw people in. We have to work people through a system and recognizing that you want functional zero. And that's what they refer to it as. So we've got to invest in different levels of housing, and that's really what Home Illinois is all about. But it takes money, like lots of other things. It takes money if you want to take on, and this is a hard problem to overcome because I can tell you from 5 years and now a 6th year of fighting for a balanced budget, when you get down to, okay, we're in the last few days and there's only so much money, what are we going to fund? You know what always gets left out? Housing. Because it's one of the most expensive things that government can do in general. And yet, housing has so much effect, and the studies really prove this, on everything else. Your health. Right? Your housing affects your health. Your ability to get educated is affected by your housing. Almost everything you can think of, holding a job, it's all proven to come back to, do you have permanent housing, flexible housing, whatever the type of housing is that's necessary. So that's what we're bringing for the state of Illinois, and the resources that we put toward it are significant. We were up to $200 million for Home Illinois as of the 24 budget that we're in now, and in the new budget we've put another $50 million, and it's not just about throwing money. There's a real plan behind this, and I would commend you all to look at what Rockford has done to deal with homelessness, and I love that it's an Illinois city that is being modeled not just in Illinois but all across the country.
Thank you. a question that borders on the political. The map of Illinois shows a lot of Democratic blue in and around Chicago and lots of Republican red through wide swaths of central and southern Illinois. In fact, while this is a very friendly crowd, I think, Sangamon County gave majorities to Republican Donald Trump in his 2 presidential elections, and you have come close but didn't win the county in your 2 statewide runs. So, do you see a path forward to the state ever becoming more unified in this contentious time, and what message would you have for downstate Republicans?
So a time when the state's fully blue is what you're saying? No.
Except Madison County.
When you say unified, you mean on our side, my side of the aisle? Look, I want to remind everybody, I mean, there are people who look at the state and say, well, maybe we should have an electoral college system. We'll do it by county. Because, of course, Democrats tend to win, 2, 4, 7, I don't know. I won 16 counties, which I'm very proud of when I won in
and there's only 102.
2018. Yes. But the most populous counties, so do I think that we're going to change, that we're going to have a more unified state in terms of the blue and red counties? I'll just say I think that I look at all the counties, and there are a whole lot of blue voters in counties that that went red. There are a whole lot. And I really, I've been to every county, and sometimes, as a Democrat, there's a small room of 5 of us, who are meeting. But there are a lot of people who, and think about it, if you're, just like if you're a Republican in a Democratic county, in a heavily Democratic county, if you're a Democrat in a heavily Republican county, and, you got neighbors and friends, and everybody's a Republican, it seems like, it's really hard to go to the neighborhood picnic or the community picnic, right, and talking politics with everybody. And so Democrats tend to either be completely silent and not express themselves and only do that in the privacy of the ballot box, or they will just say they're Republican, because that's the easiest thing to do. And I just want to finish by saying that our state definitely is divided, but it is not divided in the way that I think people like to talk about it. And one of the things that gives me great hope is Illinois was never, before I became governor, and frankly till 2020, honestly, Illinois, even after Donald Trump got elected, was not, like Republicans talked to Democrats, and Democrats talked to Republicans, and there were bipartisan things that happened in this state. And think about back to somebody I admire greatly, Jim Thompson as governor, right? He was a guy who, was really well loved, I think, by people on both sides of the aisle. He's somebody I think that governors ought to emulate in that way. And Jim Edgar is another good example of somebody who was, acceptable to people on both sides of the aisle and well liked. And so I do think we have to find ways to talk to one another. We don't do that anymore. We don't talk to, it bothers me, because my first year in office, I invited Republicans over to the governor's mansion and had, regularly, I'm talking every week, have a group of Republicans and Democrats, and we would all talk to them, because I thought, we're going to do this. We're going to, kind of be the lone state in the country, where we can actually have bipartisanship. And something happened in 2020. And obviously, COVID came, but I can't explain why people took this as an opportunity for massive division. And so I'm troubled by that. And, again, you could have disliked everything I did about COVID, but it didn't mean that people couldn't talk to one another. But now it feels like people don't talk to one another. And I'm trying very hard to find Republicans to talk to, and I do. There are some really great Republicans, and I talk to the leadership in both the Senate and the House on the Republican side on a regular basis. I know there's not a lot of other people talking about it, but I just wanted you to know that we got to work on this. All of us have to work on this, how to talk to one another who belong to different parties.
I'm getting Somewhat of a high sign, and we're near our end. I'm going to sneak in one more question if I can, because it is something that has bothered me. People who own guns that can no longer be sold in Illinois under the new law are supposed to register those firearms with the state. Clearly, many gun owners have not done that, claiming an infringement of rights, even as court challenges are being played out. Many sheriffs, including Sangamon's own, called the law unconstitutional early on. How do you envision enforcing the new law, and could attempts to enforce it lead to dangerous confrontations?
So the first thing I'll say is just because someone thinks that the law is unconstitutional does not make it unconstitutional. It is something that gets decided by courts if you want to take it to court. The law that we pass is not unconstitutional, but the courts will decide. The registration of, and I want to remind you, there were two pieces of this, right? One is we needed to know who has an assault weapon, because otherwise you would have no idea if somebody's going out of state and buying assault weapons and bringing them back in, and whether that gun is actually legal. Nobody's taking guns away from anybody. I know that gets talked about on talk radio, that there's gun grabbing going on. That's not what that law does. It says that if you have an assault weapon, you get to keep your assault weapon. Maybe there are people who are upset about that, by the way, on the other side, right, who think that people shouldn't have them. That is not the law. We passed a law that says if you have one of these weapons, you can keep it. You just have to tell us you have it, because otherwise people will just drive across the state lines, buy 50 of them, bring them back, hand them out, whatever, and sell them to their friends, and and we'll just have a lot more of them. So that's one thing. And then like I said, I know there are sheriffs and some state's attorneys that don't like the fact that we have a law like this, but it is your job when you take a job as a police officer or a police chief or a sheriff's deputy or a state's attorney to uphold the law. And I know that there's all these organizations now, and I think it started with Donald Trump, this whole movement, but maybe it started before. You'll tell me later. But where there's like constitutional sheriffs, right? Somehow they're like they know better than everybody else. The reality is that there's only one set of laws, and if they get determined to be constitutional, then they need to be upheld by state's attorneys and sheriffs and police. And last thing is that this registration, there's all this talk again on right-wing radio about so few people have registered. Well, they're taking the number of people who've registered their weapons, and the denominator, that's the numerator, the denominator they're using is 2.4 million people who have FOID cards. Not everybody had an assault weapon. 2.4 million people did not have assault weapons. And so the number of people who will register their weapons is going to be a fraction of a small fraction of the people who have FOID cards. And so, and I'm sure there are people, I know like my opponent in 2022 says he's not registering it, and he's from his cold dead hand.
I saw that on the video, yeah.
And the reality is that no one's going to bang on his door and take away his weapon. Nobody was ever going to do that. But it's a spectacle that he wants to make. And the reality is that we're never going to have. Everybody is required who has an assault weapon is required, in fact, to register that assault weapon. That number is radically increasing. I am sure that when this is determined to be constitutional, most people will make sure that their weapon is registered if they haven't already. But it's never going to be some number like 2.4 million. It's going to be a lot less than that.
Okay.
So.
Well, Governor, on behalf of the club, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
I would just like to thank the governor, too, for being at the Citizens Club of Springfield. I think it's a first. So thank you very, very much for being here tonight. And thank you to all the audience for coming this evening and for being patient with us. And if you want to hear more about Springfield, please come back on May 24th at 8 a.m. so you can learn what Scott Dahl's doing with all the tourism activity in our city. So thanks again, everyone.